And there's only been 2 times that I've played the trump card against my wife: getting into rentals and quitting my job. Out of everything that we've ever done, those are the 2 most things that got her the most uncomfortable. And it was the only time I've had to play the trump card. I was like, no, like I so believe in this and what this can do from our family. Like, I'm willing to risk this or play the trump card. And in 7 years of marriage, those was the only 2 times I've really, where she was like adamantly like, I don't feel this, but like, again, like was accepting if I ended up the decision. So, but luckily I wanted
You better
to
be
quit.
right if you're playing that trump card.
That's right. I mean, you're risking a lot. And so,
Yeah.
and so I wanted to leave like as soon as I got the second property. I was like, this thing in real estate is awesome. If you ever met someone who's high A personality, they're like, oh, I got this. Like, this is awesome. We're going to do this. I was like, I'm quitting like tomorrow. And she's like, no way. Like, not yet. And so like, I definitely heeded her voice at not yet. But I definitely jumped sooner than probably what she was comfortable with. So I guess in a roundabout way, I ended up doing that. But I got to about 60% of our income, which was like, if I'm doing this at 10 to 20 hours a week and I can get to 60% of our income passively, if I was working 40 hours a week, what would that do? And so it started with, hey, here's one rental, all the ups and downs that went with it. And then it was like, okay, here's the second one, bunch of up and downs. Like, I think the first 5 to 10 properties we'll barely make money on. It was like trying to flip houses, besides my very first property, which was a house hack for a bunch of college students, which turned out extremely well. We tried to flip houses. We tried to buy turnkey. We were investing capital. We were buying, old houses. And until we got onto like our current strategy, it was just a lot of like trial and error of like what works and what doesn't work. And so like, as soon as I got the first mailbox money, I was like, oh, this is it. I could just go full time. I can raise private money. I can find deals, and like, we're just going to go. And I was advised both by my wife, but then another mechanical engineer that I was in a mastermind with. He's like, Adam, you're 50 yards from the shore. He goes, you could just jump and swim like hell. And yeah, you'll probably make it, but why not just wait 2 to 5 years, coast right into the dock, tie in the boat, and walk straight onto land? And he goes, and so that was his metaphor that really helped me, was like, okay, I want to do this. What's the difference between if Adam does this at 32 versus 34 or 30 versus 35? Like, in general, my whole plan was, if I can just retire 10 years early, I was going to be super happy. That's why I started. It's like, oh, if I can retire at 50, that was a great plan. Like, as an engineer, I had like a 25-year plan of like, oh, I'm going to buy one property every other year with $25,000. And by the time I get to this, like, it'll do that. And it's like, oh, at least just starting with that frame of reference, and then slowly like, oh, well, actually I did this. Oh, I learned that. Okay, this is what I'm not going to do. Okay, here's how I can get higher ROIs. Okay, here's how I can, leverage other people's money. Oh, and then you start getting a lot smarter. And you're like, oh, here's ways I can do things differently to lower the risk. And so then it just slowly started compounding. But once it was like, hey, I got to 60% of the revenue, my wife was like, okay, like, this makes sense. So then I slowly transitioned to part-time, basically told them I want to work for X amount of hours, and I'm slowly, transitioning out. And then my wife quit her job. I finished quitting my job. And so then we've been, both job free here for a couple of years and loving it.
Looking back, do you think if you had made a few different decisions, you could have left sooner, or you think that was what you needed to do to be able to leave?
It's tough because looking back on it, having a high income job to fuel capital growth or invest with other people or invest into system and processes is such a strong advantage. Oh, and not only that, but then leveraging your ability to get bank financing. Like, the amount of 4% and 3%, 80% LTV, 30-year loans that I got is just, mind boggling. So had I jumped, not been able to secure financing. So it's like, ooh, while I got this, what are my strengths right now? The strength is I have a W-2 job. I got high income and I'm very lendable. Okay. Those are the things I'm going to leverage. Now that I have more freedom, it's like, okay, I have more freedom over my time. I can be more creative. I can be more intentional with my time. I can take more travel. Like, okay, now how do I leverage those strengths? So thinking about any situation that you're at in life, you probably have 1 to 3 superpowers that you're sitting on that you can leverage. And it's figuring out, oh, is it Am I a good networker? Am I good at finding deals? Am I super analytical? Can I create processes? Do I have, the ability to get a loan? Do I, can I raise money? Like there's usually something that's your superpower. Like I know the area really well. It's like, ooh, how do you leverage that? Because I'm such a fan of leverage. I'd leveraged it 99% if I could, if the bank would let me. And oftentimes, we've gotten creative where we, sometimes can, and you can be over leveraged, but just in general, when you're starting off, I'm like, I have so much ability to absorb risk now versus later. Like when I had one child, the amount of risk that I could take on, like if I put in 20 grand and I lost it, no big deal. Like to some people, it'd be like a deal breaker, but it's like, okay, that's basically the cost of an education. So instead of getting my master's in business for 20K, I'm going to go put that into a property and that'll, be the equivalent of getting a master's, and I might make money. I might lose money. So that's kind of my stance on it. And I can probably end it there because I could keep going on because it's a good question.
No, that makes so much sense. I love that. I think it's such great advice. I love that you started with a house hack. I'd love to hear more about how you progressed. So you talked through like the early, some of the things you tried early on. If others want to see sort of a diagram of your investing progression, they can go to engineeringrei.com. That's I saw it before we did this interview. It's a cool diagram that shows the progression. But if you could talk through kind of beyond then, once you started getting a few cash flowing properties and you felt like, okay, I can leave my full-time job. What'd you do from there? And I guess, were there any turning points for you or realizations where you've kind of shifted strategy?
For sure. So I own now one rental in my own personal name. The rest are with partners. So I know there can be some pros and cons with partnering with people. And again, this is like, you can partner with someone like you're dating. Like you'd be like, oh, contractor, do this. Or it could be like a joint venture where you're like kind of engaged and it's this one deal. Or you can get quote unquote business married where you're in an LLC with someone and like your finances are tied and the deals are tied together. And so I would recommend a date, get engaged before you get into business marriage with someone in general. But that's been such a superpower for me. So it started off with like, hey, I like this. I'm going to get a house hack. My college buddies are going to pay down my mortgage. Awesome. That worked for, 5 years. And then it was like, okay, are we going to sell this house, upgrade, and then just go the typical keeping up with the Joneses? And I convinced my wife to keep that property at that time. And like almost everything could have went wrong. Like they flooded the basement. They forgot to put down the downspouts on a Sunday night. My wife and I are pulling up carpet. And we were this close to being like, yeah, we're never doing rentals. Like this is eating up into our Sunday night. And like, we were painting houses when I had a 3-month-old. And it was like, okay, like, is this really what we want? Is this worth it in the end? Is the delayed gratification worth it? That's one thing I'm teaching my kids right now, basically the marshmallow test. You can have one marshmallow now, or if you wait 5 minutes, you can have 2 marshmallows. The famous, kind of cruel experiment, back in the 80s where they were figuring out, hey, if kids can delay gratification in life, they're so much better off. Hey, I can do this now and reap the benefits later. And so we were looking at this, I'm like, okay, we're going to stick with it. But once I found a partner who had complementary skill sets to mine, he was in construction. I'm an engineer, but he was like, I'm going to work 50 hours a week. He was like a doer getting stuff done, where if you're familiar with rocket fuel, like maybe more visionary ideas, playing stuff. And he's more the integrator. Oh my goodness. That was such a game changer. Or even just having someone to bounce ideas off of. I talked to my wife. I'm like, hey, we're thinking about buying this property. And here's the comps. And she's kind of like, yeah, what do you want to have for supper? And it's like, okay, well, like I may be mixing and blending things a little bit different. Whereas if you got someone else who's like equally passionate about real estate, and not only that, has equity and capital invested in the same mission, that can be, superpower. It comes with its same risks, just like marriage, right? You're going to have ups and you're going to have downs. You're going to have disagreements. You're going to have things that you like. But ever since that first property, every other property was in an LLC with I think I'm in 7 LLCs with maybe 4 different partners. And that's what I look for. It's like, okay, if someone's really good at marketing, is someone good at operations? If someone's really good at sales, is someone else really good at finances? And finding that person and being able to trust that person. Like same thing with my wife. Like in marriage, I want my wife to get the better end of the deal. in business marriage, I want my business partner to be getting the better end of the deal. Like Adam's bringing so much value to this that his net worth, his income, his whatever is getting the better end of the deal. And if both of you come with that mentality, it can be super helpful. I've heard of a lot of businesses that haven't gone well, and I've had one or two that went south on like a dating or getting engaged, type mentality. And I've learned a lot from it, but overall, I couldn't be more for it. It's like, oh, you have someone else that's gone through all the experiences, or you have someone else with a shared passion for you. And so that's what it was. We were combining capital, time, and resources and experience. I was probably a little bit further ahead than my current business partner that we own, 50 plus properties in. But he was like, I'm committed to this. He had a bunch of capital he could leverage. He had like handyman, connections and different things. So then once we started doing that, we just started, teaming up on, okay, we're going to vet this deal. What do you like about this one? And then you can cover each other's weaknesses a lot. So I could definitely go into, kind of properties 2, 3, 4 of like, hey, we bought a house, thought it could go from a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom. So that's what I, kind of wanted to get into. And then the difference between like conventional loans versus commercial loans, some that count towards your debt to income ratio, some that don't. But there's it kind of started there from first property, 2012. The next property wasn't until 2017 to now having, 50 plus in 2023 here. So it really ramped up when 2017, that's when I formed the LLC partnership with my current business partner to scale.
I think this speaks directly to your last point around recognizing your competitive advantage and your superpower. And it's something I share with people all the time. It's exactly along the same lines. It's something I wish I would have recognized earlier, because I think we try to overcompensate for the areas that we are weak in, and try to, we think that that's a big weakness on us, or like that we're not as good of a person or as good of an investor if we have these weaknesses, instead of just focusing on what are we good at and what drives us and what is our competitive advantage. And like you said, then you can leverage those things and really ramp those things up. And that has made all the difference for me. I primarily focus on those things. I know my DNA now. I know, my own personality, what I'm going to do well at, what I'm not going to do well at. And I don't try to, I don't go down those roads that I used to go down that weren't best for me. They might be great for somebody else, but they're not best for me. And so I think, to your point with this partnership, if you can recognize that yourself first, as early as possible, what your strengths are, and then recognize in other people what theirs are, and marry those things up, that is a recipe for success there. So
yeah, and one thing I might add is I remember watching a video by Patrick Bet-Davis, and it was 2 lines crossing almost like an X. And on the left side, it was working in your business and on your business. And when you first start off, like you're doing everything, like you don't have a choice. It's 100% you. You can't delegate anything. You don't have the resources, and maybe not a lot of people partner to begin with. But then as time progresses, the amount of effort and things that you have to do by yourself should diminish as you go on. And then to the complementary side, you can start then working on your business versus in your business. But I do remember the days where I was like, oh, I'm building the spreadsheet, I'm analyzing the deals, and you still have agents and bankers and different people, but it was like, oh, I am 100% driving this bus and making the decisions. But I did realize that like I could like push through different things. But there might be a period where you're just like, I'm doing everything myself to start with, just to learn and go through the process of getting your first deal, your second deal, whatever it is, like 100% yourself, where some people just go straight to and be like, nope, I'd rather partner. I'd rather do this. And I think it's kind of your risk tolerance, your comfort, and how fast you want to go. Because yeah, basically if you jump into the deep end, as long as you don't lose everything, like, boy, you're going to really learn about property management, about finances, about taxes, about marketing, about what deals are good, what deals aren't bad, versus if you had a partner that was doing a lot of it, even though you get the advantages of seeing it and being part of it. So we've kind of helped people on both ends of the spectrum, but just thought I would share that as well.